My name is Clara Evans. I'm 68 years old. And on the morning of my husband's funeral, I learned that silence can sound very different once you know you're finally free. Arthur Evans was a respected physician in our town. For 52 years, people admired him for his discipline, his composure, his devotion to his patients. They said I was lucky to have such a steady man. They never saw how steady can also mean controlled, how devotion can feel like a leash. The house was full that day, full of condolences, perfume, and people who spoke in whispers because grief is supposed to be delicate. I didn't cry. I poured tea, nodded, and listened to the soft lies of sympathy. He was such a good man, they said. You must be heartbroken. I smiled because that was what was expected of me. But inside I felt nothing, only a strange, hollow quiet. When the last guests left, I sat alone in the front room, still in my black dress, the tea beside me gone cold. That was when my nephew, Charles Grant, leaned close and said, "Aunt Clara, did Uncle ever change the deed to the house?" For a second I thought I had misheard. He tapped his temple as if that would help me understand. You know, in case you need help managing things. Managing things. My husband hadn't even been in the ground 5 hours, and already the vultures were circling. I didn't answer him. I just looked out the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. It was the first moment I realized I had spent my entire adult life in a cage that looked like a home. Later that evening, when everyone was gone and the house was quiet again, I walked through each room like a stranger. Same furniture, same curtains, same rugs I had cleaned for decades, yet everything felt unfamiliar, almost hollow. There was one door I had never opened, the one Arthur always kept locked, his office. For years he said it was private, filled with medical records I wouldn't understand. Even after retirement, he kept it locked. That night, I stopped in front of it. My reflection in the brass handle looked older than I remembered. I touched the door. It was cold, like it had been waiting. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, the house still heavy with yesterday's silence. I couldn't stop thinking about that door. For 52 years, I had dusted around it, vacuumed its threshold, and never once crossed the line. It had been the one place that didn't belong to me. The thought sat in my chest like a stone. By 9 a.m., I had found a locksmith online. I didn't tell anyone, not Charles, not the neighbors. The man who arrived was polite, maybe in his 40s, with kind eyes that didn't ask questions. It took him 15 minutes. "Old lock," he said, wiping his hands. "Hasn't been changed in decades." Of course it hadn't. Control never evolves. It calcifies. When the door finally creaked open, the smell hit me first. Not decay, not mold, just age. Leather, paper, dust, and something faintly chemical. The air was still, like the room had been holding its breath. Everything inside was perfect. Too perfect. A polished oak desk stood at the center. Bookshelves lined the walls, every binder labeled in precise black ink. A single lamp, a globe, and a chair that looked as if it had been waiting for its owner to return. Nothing was out of place, nothing human. Then I noticed my name. It was on everything, on binders, folders, even sticky notes. Clara, medications. Clara, behavior log. Clara, finances. My initials, neat and repetitive, like a stamp of ownership. On the desk sat an envelope under a glass paperweight, cream-colored, thick, with my full name written in Arthur's careful handwriting. For a long time, I couldn't touch it. My hands shook. When I finally did, I felt a chill spread up my arms. Inside was a typed note. No greeting, no goodbye, just a list of instructions. Upon my death, contact Charles Grant immediately. Do not access my office. All financial and legal matters will be handled through the executor. Continue your medication as prescribed. Avoid unnecessary stress. That was it. No, I love you. No, thank you for the years. Just orders. Even from the grave, he was still giving me directions. I sat in his chair, the leather cold beneath me, and looked around the room. It wasn't a sanctuary of memory. It was a command center, a map of a life I thought was shared, but had been monitored instead. That night, I didn't sleep. I left the door ajar, just enough for the hallway light to spill through. It glowed like a wound breathing in the dark. By morning, I was too restless to pretend everything was normal. I made tea, forgot to drink it, and found myself standing at that same doorway again. The air inside hadn't changed, but I had. This time I didn't hesitate. I stepped in. The first drawer I opened was labeled medications. Inside were prescriptions, copies, notes, dosage adjustments, all neatly organized. My handwriting was nowhere on them, yet my name appeared again and again. One note written in Arthur's tight script read, "Increased dosage. Agitation returns." Dated 5 years ago. Agitation. I tried to remember what I had done that year that he might have called agitated. I came up empty. The next folder was worse. Letters I had written to my sister, my friend Caroline, even cards from birthdays. He had opened them, scanned them, made annotations in red pen, concerning tone, mentioned sleep issues, possible confusion. Every word of my private life had been documented like symptoms in a case study. I moved to the shelves, fingers trembling as I traced the spines. Each binder bore a year. Behavior log, 2014. Schedule review, 2017. I pulled one out. Inside, a timeline of my days. June 3rd, left home later than usual, unexplained. September 14th, refused medication. Verbal resistance. My own life reduced to bullet points typed in calm clinical detachment. He hadn't trusted me. He had studied me. Then I saw it. A velvet curtain behind the desk, slightly uneven at the bottom. I pulled it aside and froze. A wall-safe, medium-sized brushed steel. I'd seen him joke about it once at a dinner party. Every man deserves one secret, he'd said. I had laughed, thinking he meant old love letters or a bottle of whiskey. Not this. I ran my hand over the keypad. 4 digits. I sat down, scanning the room. My eyes landed on the calendar pinned above the desk. A date circled in blue. June 17th, our wedding anniversary. I typed 06170. The safe clicked open. Inside were 3 items. A thick envelope marked Last Will and Testament. A yellow folder labeled Declaration of Incapacity. Clara, and a small locked metal box. I pulled out the folder first, my breath caught. It was a notarized statement declaring that I was no longer mentally fit to manage my affairs. Signed by 2 doctors, both men I recognized from our Christmas dinners, backdated 6 months before his death. He had been preparing to declare me incompetent, quietly, legally. I could feel the pulse in my throat as I read the details. Words like cognitive decline, mild disorientation, requires supervision. It was all fiction. Every line was a lie built carefully enough to sound reasonable. He hadn't just controlled me. He had planned for my erasure. I locked the safe again and sat very still. For years, I thought I was the quiet one, the calm one, the wife who made peace in silence. But the truth was louder than I could have imagined. He hadn't left me a legacy. He'd left me a trap disguised as love. That afternoon, I opened the same drawer again, but this time with purpose. I wasn't searching for closure. I was searching for proof. I took a new folder, labeled it Clara, Evidence, and began to fill it piece by piece. Every prescription copy, every forged signature, every note that reduced me to a subject went inside. When I finished, I sat there for a long time, the folder heavy on my lap. 52 years of marriage, and this was what it had come to, a file of control. But I wasn't powerless anymore. He had documented everything. That meant I could too. By the next morning, I had found the courage to call an attorney. His name was Daniel Rios. He sounded young on the phone, maybe mid-30s, polite but firm. When we met, I handed him the will, the declaration of incapacity, the medical notes, and the letters I had found. He read in silence for nearly 10 minutes before looking up. "Mrs. Evans," he said carefully, "what your husband did wasn't just overreach. It was legal manipulation. He built a structure to take everything you own while keeping you technically alive. Can it be undone?" I asked. He nodded slowly. If we can prove intent and coercion, yes. But it won't be easy. He counted on you not fighting back. For the first time in years, I smiled. Then let's surprise him. Over the next week, I gathered more. I found letters to my friends that had been intercepted. When I called Caroline, her voice shook. He told me you were unwell, she whispered. That you didn't want visitors. Her silence on the line said the rest. My granddaughter Nora came to visit one weekend. 17, sharp, curious, fearless. She found one of the old files I hadn't hidden yet. Grandma, she asked, why does this folder have your name on it but someone else's handwriting? I told her the truth, all of it. About the locked door, the fake diagnosis, the trust that gave control to Charles. She listened without interrupting, her hands folded on her knees. When I finished, she said quietly, "That's abuse." The word landed in the air like a gavel. Abuse. Simple, brutal, true. I had spent decades calling it care, devotion, protection. But she named it for what it was. That single word lit something inside me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. That night, I wrote a list of every person who had helped him keep me small. Lawyers, doctors, relatives. And next to each name, I wrote one word: accountable. Tomorrow, I told myself, I would begin to make them all see the truth. The next morning, I received a call from Charles. His voice was smooth, calculated. "Aunt Clara," he began, "I heard you've been talking to lawyers. That's not necessary. Your husband set everything up to protect you." I took a deep breath. Protect me from what, myself? There was a pause, then a sigh. "You're grieving. I understand, but overturning a trust will only bring you more stress." "Let me handle things," I smiled to myself. "You mean handle them for yourself?" "Not this time, Charles." He tried again, his tone turning colder. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said softly. "But I've already spent 50 years regretting silence." 3 weeks later, I stood outside the courthouse beside Judith Bell, the senior attorney Mr. Rios had introduced me to. She was older, calm, the kind of woman who didn't need to raise her voice to command a room. "You ready?" she asked. I was. Inside, the air was sharp with disinfectant and nerves. Charles sat at the opposite table with his lawyer, a tall man with slicked back hair and a confidence built on arrogance. They didn't look at me. Of course not. Men like them never looked directly at the women they underestimated. The judge, a woman in her 60s, entered and called the hearing to order. Judith began first. Her voice was steady, deliberate. She didn't dramatize. She simply laid out the facts step by step, document by document. The forged signatures, the fake declaration of incapacity, the trust designed to cage me under the illusion of protection. She held up the letter Arthur had left. "Stop this now, or the world will see what I always saw." The courtroom fell into silence. Then Charles's lawyer stood, his voice oily with false compassion. "Your Honor, my client only sought to honor his uncle's wishes. Mrs. Evans has clearly been under emotional distress. Her late husband was trying to provide structure, not control." Structure? The word made my hands tremble, not from fear, but from memory. The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Evans, would you like to make a statement?" I stood, my legs didn't shake. My voice was clear. For most of my life, I believed love meant patience. That being quiet kept peace, that yielding was respect. My husband used that belief to erase me, piece by piece. He built a world where my thoughts were notes in a file and my emotions were symptoms to manage. And I let him because I thought that was love. I paused, meeting the judge's eyes. But love doesn't require you to disappear. It doesn't hide behind legal documents. It doesn't write your life as a diagnosis. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to reclaim what was mine before anyone decided I needed supervision. The judge nodded once, then recessed for deliberation. I sat in silence, watching the clock tick. For the first time in decades, every second belonged to me. 30 minutes later, the judge returned. Her voice was calm but final. "The court finds sufficient evidence of manipulation and coercive control. The trust is hereby dissolved." All assets and property are returned to Mrs. Clara Evans. Mr. Grant is removed as executor, effective immediately. For a long moment, no one moved. Then I exhaled. Not the shaky kind of breath that comes from fear, but the deep, steady one that comes from release. Judith leaned toward me. "It's done," she whispered. Outside, the rain had stopped. The courthouse steps gleamed in the sun. I walked down them slowly, bag in hand. And for once, I didn't look back. Because when you finally leave a cage, you don't stop to memorize the bars. The day after the ruling, I didn't rush to change anything. It's easy to confuse victory with healing, but they are not the same. Healing moves slower. It hums quietly under the noise of triumph. For a few days, the house stayed the same. The same heavy curtains Arthur insisted on for insulation. The same recliner he never let me sit in. The same trophies from medical conferences that I had dusted but never touched. It all stood like a museum to control. Then one morning, I opened every window. Every single one. The air rolled through like a tide, lifting the smell of old paper and old rules. The curtains swayed, and for the first time, sunlight reached corners that had been hidden for years. I didn't move anything yet. I just let the air remember what freedom felt like. In the office, I opened the drawer and found an envelope I had ignored before. On the front, to Clara, if she ever finds this. Inside was another letter, written in that same careful handwriting. "You're not well, Clara. You twist things. Forget things. I did this to protect you." I read it twice, then folded it once and wrote across the front. "This was never love." Then I sealed it and placed it in a box, not to keep, but to bury later. That afternoon, I drove to the park outside town where the trail winds along the creek under wide oak trees. Arthur used to say, "Walking tired me out." He called it overexertion. I called it breathing. At the halfway mark, I sat on the old bench and tore the letter into pieces. The wind took them one by one until they vanished into the trees. When I got home, I started clearing space. The curtains went first, the trophies next, the labels with my name on them, gone. I kept the evidence in a single box, neatly labeled Truth, not as a shrine, but as a reminder of what silence costs. Weeks later, I stood again in front of a group of women at the local library. The workshop I had started on clarity and emotional independence had doubled in size. Some women brought daughters. One brought her husband. They listened as I told my story, not as a tragedy, but as a map. I said, if love makes you smaller, it's not love. If care comes with control, it's not protection. It's possession. Afterward, a woman my age took my hand and whispered, "He did that to me too." Her words trembled, but her eyes didn't. I squeezed her hand. "Then start here," I told her. "Start with your name. My granddaughter Nora visits often now. We cook, laugh, talk about her college plans. One night she asked, 'Grandma, do you think he ever loved you?' I looked out the window before answering. He loved the version of me that never asked why. But me, the woman I am now, he never met her." That night, I placed the court ruling in a small frame beside my bed, not as proof, but as peace. The paper that once defined my captivity now marked my freedom. Before turning off the light, I whispered to the quiet house, "You can rest now." And for the first time, the silence didn't sound like loneliness. It sounded like me.